Hey everyone. Well, Need for Speed Unbound has been out for a little while now. The launch hype has settled down, and players have had a chance to put some more time into the game. Or put it down and have had some more time to reflect, which is seemingly being paired with a pretty sharp decline in user reviews since launch. See, Unbound released to favorable reviews from both fans and critics, floating around the 8 out of 10 range. Games Radar gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, calling it a strong return for Need for Speed. Game Informer scored it at an 8.5, saying Unbound is as much fun as I've had with a Need for Speed title in years. And PC Gamer gave it a 76 out of 100, calling it a deeply worthy addition to the genre. I myself said that with Unbound, I can finally say the Need for Speed franchise is good again. Overall, with 108 critic reviews, the game stands at a 75 out of 100 on OpenCritic. But like I said, it wasn't just critics that enjoyed Unbound. On December 3rd, a few days after the full release, the Steam score sat at an impressive 82%, a very positive score. Even on Metacritic, which can be a bit notorious for negative reviews and review bombing, the game had a user score of 7.9 with nearly 200 ratings. Let's look at those scores now though, which paint a very different picture. Currently, on Steam, Unbound sits at a mixed score for both overall and recent reviews, totaling 66%, with 58% for the recent scores. On Metacritic as well, Unbound has plummeted to a user score of 6.5, or even lower on PC. Within the first week of Unbound's release, the game scored well ahead of its predecessors, pretty much everywhere you looked, but now it sits well below them. So what happened? How did a game that was released to such universal positive reception early on fall so far in a matter of weeks without the game really changing at all? Well, there's a few factors at play here. For starters, we need to talk about Unbound's main story-based campaign. I and many others heavily praised the main campaign structure. It's super unique for the genre, has some pretty standout characters, and in my playthrough, took about 25 hours to get through. And there's the sticking point. The first, maybe 20 to 30 or so hours of the game, for most players, are really quite good. For me, it is genuinely the most fun I've had with a Need for Speed campaign since the Black Box era. It's no God of War level mastercraft in storytelling, and there's a fair dose of cheese, but that's practically a staple of the franchise at this point. I absolutely got what I expected and more out of my campaign experience. However, after you beat the campaign and dive into the post-game single player or jump into your separate online career, you may realize there isn't much left to do. And for many, the features feel underdeveloped. I said this in my initial review. Once you beat the main story, you're likely going to get bored with both the single player and online endgame within a few days to weeks. And, well, I think that's largely what we're seeing in the dropping reviews. Early on, players were still in the thick of the campaign and thought the game was good and would continue on with that level of care and quality, so they reviewed it positively based on that. They may have set their expectations on the assumption that if the campaign is better than previous games, the post-game and online would be too. They were having fun with a good game and expected it to continue to be good past the 25 or 30 hour mark, or only wanted to get the main story out of the game and felt that they got what they wanted. Now, however, not only have those same players had more time with the game and had a chance to change their reviews, more patient reviewers and long-term players are also putting in their more complete reviews after getting to the endgame and realizing it's a bit underdeveloped. Newcomers also now know what to expect with word getting out about the lack of endgame, and they're tempering their expectations. Like it or not, public opinion about a game does have an effect on most players' personal opinion as well. But here's where I'm kind of getting at with this. Is this just a player expectation problem, or is it an issue with the game itself? I think many people, even those who reviewed the game poorly, would still say there's about 25 hours of good game in Unbound. If you look at the majority of negative Steam reviews, they don't say the game as a whole is bad. Most of them are saying it's just overpriced. At a cheaper price, maybe $40, the game would have been worth it, because that's what they deem their 25 hours of entertainment is worth, not the pretty steep $70 it cost. But here's the problem. Unbound did go on sale for nearly a week at $40, and instead of reviews climbing back up, this is actually where they took a sharp dive, and we saw for the first time negative reviews overtaking positive ones. So it's easy to say that maybe pricing isn't the issue, but usually with games on sale, players still evaluate them based on their full price, even if they got the game for cheaper. You may have bought Unbound for $40, but you likely still treated it as a $70 game, and that's because part of marketing and the public expectation is the original asking price. If they're asking for $10 more than what the last game cost when new, they're setting up high expectations. And for most players, putting the game on sale isn't really going to lower those expectations. Sure, maybe if the game launched for $40, this would be a different story. But any way you cut it, $70 is a lot to ask for 25 hours of gaming entertainment in today's market. Players expect more these days. If you look back, though, at the ever-praised Black Box era, where most fans will say the best games were made, Underground 2 is roughly a 25-hour campaign experience, with just about nothing to do after you beat the main campaign. The world essentially shuts down and goes quiet. You could play multiplayer, but it was of course quite bare bones. There weren't really any endgame challenges. You experienced everything the game had to offer after about 25 hours. Most Wanted is in a similar boat, with a roughly 25-hour campaign and limited multiplayer. The obvious exception here being the 70 or so challenges that you could complete, which helped pad out time once you beat the story. This continues with Carbon, Pro Street, and so on, where the real main meat of the game is no more than 20 or 25 hours, with some light challenge and multiplayer features added on. Unbound delivers, at least to me and the majority of the player base, the exact same experience. A solid 25-hour main campaign with some challenges and light multiplayer features tacked on. I know I'm opening the door here to some fiery comments, but Unbound is essentially a modern reimagining of something like Most Wanted. Even the story follows some very similar themes, and directly comparing feature to feature in a vacuum, Unbound mostly comes out on top, with way more customization, way more cars, a much bigger world with a lot more to do, and honestly, a more fleshed out multiplayer mode. Strictly by the numbers, Unbound is a much better game than Most Wanted or Underground. Aside from the fact that you can't really measure passion and heart and a healthy dose of nostalgia, which I think many would agree the Black Box era has in droves. But here's my point to this. Need for Speed fans have been asking for Underground 2 and Most Wanted remakes for ages, and I genuinely believe that Unbound is a near perfect modern reimagining of the mashup of those two games. And yet, obviously, players are still disappointed, because although we may be asking for games like the Black Box Legends, we're still expecting games that build on more modern features. Unbound's online might be better than Most Wanted, but it sure as heck isn't better than Heat. We might want a game with the heart and soul of the Black Box era, but it still needs a feature set that builds upon the previous modern games and remains competitive with other games in the genre. That, to me, is where the real problem is. Don't get me wrong, Horizon has its own host of issues, but when you see monthly content updates that go on for years, dozens of ways to play online, major content expansions, and so on, it's hard to look at Unbound and be happy with an endgame that is more bare bones than its own predecessor, Heat. It just isn't enough anymore to make a decent 25-hour racing game and market it for a full price. And although I think the player base can often struggle to agree on and know what it truly wants, that isn't a problem the players need to fix. Dev studios should be held to a higher standard. Games should evolve and improve over previous iterations. That's the entire point of a sequel in this style. It shouldn't be just about fulfilling a quota, just adding another entry to the series. It should be about having the passion to change and improve upon your work and deliver something that differs itself from and expands on the series. Unfortunately, Unbound doesn't do enough of that. Unbound is just another game in the series. And although I do still think it's a good game when it stands alone, it doesn't stand out from the other games in the franchise. Need for Speed needs to evolve. And to me, That is why this happened. Players expected evolution, and when we all bit into Unbound, we got a taste of it that was quickly soured by the stale aftertaste of its predecessors. To wrap this video up, of course, Criterion still has time. We know that content updates are planned, some of which will focus on expanding the online career and adding cars and more content. So although as of late the franchise has not had the best track record for post-launch support, I still really hope this video ages poorly. I hope we see a No Man's Sky style turnaround with some incredible post-launch support that realizes the potential Unbound does have. I've been playing Need for Speed for 25 years now and have a deep love for the franchise, so I want to see it succeed. I want to see it evolve and reclaim its place at the top of the arcade racing genre. And for now anyway, it's in Criterion's hands to deliver that. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.